how much air traffic there is now. Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? I want to thank everyone for joining me here. The activity in the comment section. See one user with the name of Osmandius. You guys all know Osmandius, right? Shelley. My name is Osmandius, King of Kings. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the site of that colossal wreck, or round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Before we get going, I know that several of you are wondering about the title. I'm going to do my best to keep this salt-free. Why not? Unless it has to do with Denver, because Denver sucks. Denver sucks in the chat, by the way. Very appreciative. I was thinking this over Christmas of all of you for so many reasons. When it comes to the reasons I am thankful for you, it is your thirst for knowledge and truth. It is to be respected. It is to be sought after. But done so with the awareness that he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I assure all of you I know much. Anyway, coming to you from my living room instead of the upstairs studio right now, because it is one of the last nights for some of the holiday stuff at Elitch, and Kat has taken the kids. Yes, I know that's in Denver, but they're protected. So we have our first super chat. What's up, Robert? Robert says, hello, dude. I just want to hear you say one more time. Paul Begley and Mike from around the world are frauds. I don't know. Know much. Anyway, coming to you from my living room instead of the up. Knowledge increases sorrow. I assure all of you I know much.
Afraid somebody's going to steal your ideas and sell them to Hollywood, huh?
Perhaps. Would you like me to read you some poetry?
Sure, why not?
This is my favorite poet.
Who's
It
the
was
poet?
the divine Edgar.
Who's the divine Edgar? Edgar who?
Edgar Allan Poe, of course. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. Notice how he emphasizes this word. It was hard by the dim lake of Ulba in the misty mid-region of Weir. You see, he takes a word like dim in one line and twists it, you see? And it comes back as mid-region of Weir.
Mid-region. And twist it to dim. Ah, that's pretty good. Pretty clever.
Thus I pacified sight.
At the start of my Shining video iScream, I asked how long you thought it would take to deconstruct the most complex film of all time. And the answer for me was almost 2 years of relentless analysis. Imagine my surprise when it seemed it would only take 7 months to decode all of these, but decode here only means applying the same methods taught to us by The Shining. If you haven't seen that first video, don't worry. Everything can boil down into 3 techniques of analysis, but which you may never have considered before. Identifying the art objects on his shelves and walls tell us a little more about the scene and larger story. So when Alice Harford is saying,
"If you men only knew."
Behind her head is Helen of Troy, Rapa Nui, and the Olympiad series. Their daughter shares a name with the stolen queen of Greek myth. And Ziegler's wife is named Ilona.
Victor, Ilona, Alice, Bill.
Which is the Hungarian version of Helena, and is the name of that mythology's Queen of the Fairies. So what don't men know about the lives of mythological queens, even after millions of years of evolution? Right? Something the women of Easter Island could tell them? Rapa Nui was known to the indigenous people as Te Pita o Te Kainga Ahaumaka, a name that can mean navel of the world. And isn't it a naval officer who is about to inspire Bill's descent into Wonderland?
Do you remember one night in the dining room, there was this young naval officer, and he was sitting near our table with 2 other officers?
No.
The waiter brought him a message, which point he left. Nothing rings a bell?
No.
Maybe men need to know that marriage is not an escape from hierarchical thinking. Most years ought to be golden, but that doesn't mean the bronzes aren't out there.
I love Victor's art collection. Don't you?
Yes. It's wonderful.
He has a wonderful collection of Renaissance bronzes. The sculpture gallery is upstairs. Would you like to see it? I can show it to you. We won't be gone long.
This is basically the same as the first thing, only now applied to any number of other recurring motifs in the film. And whether it's the art objects or some other symbol code, he'll often alter these things between shots or between scenes to bury the significance or to distract us from what he's really saying. So, after Dr. Harford has his encounter with the homophobic Yale boys, there's a business behind his head called nipped in the bud. We can be sure of this thanks to the neon roses, which he had passed only moments ago, watching some kind of sexual transaction take place. And behind him, then, were the buildings we see in the right box, which would imply that they're the shops right around the corner from here, right? But when we see this restaurant later, the street that can be seen continuing on past Nipped in the Bud is now a dead end, Why would that be? Maybe the only way to understand why is to assemble all the available evidence and trace the path of codes. Finally, there's what I call the mirror form. It means watching the film forwards and backwards simultaneously to look for key moments when visuals and/or the soundtrack harmonize in an interesting way. So when Bill's being grilled by the Red Cloak for the passwords, watch what happens.
May I have the password, please?
Fidelio.
On Fidelio, Milich's daughter appears in the reverse action, And when the subject of the second password comes up,
That's right, sir. That is the password for admittance. But may I ask, what is the password for the house?
Was it the second password? Is that what gave me away?
Yes, finally. But not because you didn't know it. It's because there was no second password.
but is that true? What did Millich's daughter whisper in Bill's ear? But that's a subject for the next video, which will look exclusively at Eyes Wide Shut, which is, so far as I can tell, the most complex of Kubrick's films, surpassing even The Shining.
Mr. Allen, what is in room 237?
Nothing. There ain't nothing in room 237.
In fact, I started there on my post-Shining Kubrick journey and thought I might stop there, but once I found that the mirror form was once again a cipher for decrypting the film's secrets, I thought, okay, is there a Kubrick film the mirror form would not help us understand better?
Tulip. Monica. David. Monica. All right. I wonder if I did that right.
Turns out, not only does it clarify the mysteries of all the rest, it even reveals how the individual films aren't just talking to themselves, they're also talking to one another. When the gang of Yale boys bark out their string of homophobic catcalls at Dr. Harford, there's one line of dialogue that doesn't show up in the film's subtitles when this guy goes, In 2001: A Space Odyssey, the main early hominid, the first to waken and notice the monolith, is named Moonwatcher. And in the mirror form, he's noticing the monolith at the same moment as Dave Bowman is staring out his escape pod window at a painting replicating the work of Francois Boucher, a name that, translated into English, could be Frank Butcher. Moonwatcher, Frank Butcher, Moon Puncher? So it's like this boy, by inventing this nonsense phrase, is unwittingly telling Dr. Harford that he is going to make an evolutionary leap within himself, not unlike the leap between Moonwatcher and Frank Butcher. In fact, when Bill later meets the gay hotel clerk at the Hotel Jaso, there's a thing advertising famed jazz musician Bill Watrous, who played trombone on one of my favorite jazz songs of all time, Deodato's Also Sprach Zarathustra, a song that might not exist if not for 2001: A Space Odyssey. What Bill's evolutionary leap is, we'll have to wait, but this is not the end of our trail of butcher crumbs. There's also the fact that Hal is responsible for the death of Dr. Frank Poole, so Hal is a bit of a butcher of Franks. As is Humbert when he shoots dead this painting of Frances Cook, a female Frank, how progressive, in a room with another Boucher painting, The Love Letter, which appears opposite Humbert giving Lolita the last expression of his so-called love, a check for $10,000. Another Boucher-style piece also appears as the rival apes go to war over this little pool, which I guess makes Moonwatcher a pool butcher. Just as Bill and Ziegler debate the manner of Amanda Curran's curious demise around this red-soaked pool table.
And I have to be completely frank.
Alex DeLarge commits suicide above this pool table, thanks to the vengeful spirit of a man named Frank.
Well done, Frank.
One of Joker's fellow recruits is named Franklin, and one is named 8-Ball, which is the last ball you sink in a game of 8-Ball, who becomes the first of the VC sniper's victims. The Frank subtext in The Shining is, as you'd expect, quite vast, but Jack is almost clubbed to death in the shadow of this pool table, which sits next to this photo by Franklin Silke, while some butchered Grady twins show up next to these. And that Frank photo also hangs next to the butchering of the Overlook's cook. Barry Lyndon features this Boucher piece, The Muse, appearing opposite a scene of Barry being rewarded for helping butcher the French on behalf of the Germanic Prussians, the very two peoples descended from those lovable barbarians known as Franks. That leaves Dr. Strangelove, where the president's right-hand man is Frank. Boucher can also be translated as mass murder, so there's a Frank sitting at hand when the president says,
"I will not go down in history as the greatest mass murderer since Adolf Hitler,"
with the opposite image being Jack D. Ripper, who was named for something of a mass murderer. And, you know, the story might just end with every Frank in existence getting butchered. I guess there was just something about pools and cooks and the butchery of Franks that Kubrick thought we should think about. So, yes, to be fully literate of Kubrick's visuals, we need to consider 1, how literate he was of what he put in his frames. Then we need to consider 2, how these recurring motifs might be speaking within the film's context and or between films. And finally, 3, we need to study how the two sides of the story reflect one another. That's how simple our approach can be. But was he that simplistic? I stopped at Lolita for many reasons, but the main two are, first, how the next film back, Spartacus, was disowned by Kubrick in response to the studio meddling with the final cut. So, had he been doing Mirrorform from the beginning, the meddling probably ruined the effect in Spartacus. And second, there just so happens to be quite a few allusions to Lolita in Eyes Wide Shut, like how the Harfords own a copy of Pearl's Kitchen, an extraordinary cookbook by Pearl Bailey, who played Frankie in 1953's Carmen Jones. And what should Charlotte have on her 1957 bookshelf but the Carmen Jones soundtrack? Or there's the way we get artifacts from the Ziegfeld Follies in obscure locations around Greenwich Village, like this hula dancer, which happens to be Lowe's exercise routine of choice. Or there's Modigliani's Standing Nude Elvira, one of at least 2, but maybe 3 paintings to ever appear in 2 of his films. Thanks to the research of fellow Kubrick analyst Julie Kearns, we know that this one features a 15-year-old runaway named Elvira, who became a sex worker presumably to survive street life, much as the 15-year-old Lowe will run away from Hum before finding that his alternative wasn't as great as he seemed.
But it never turned out that way, and instead he wanted me to cooperate with the others, making some kind of an art movie.
An art movie?
Bill's Elvira appears right after his last encounter with this geisha-style 15-year-old. But will she be able to run away from home? Does she want to? Has it even crossed her mind? So it really feels like Kubrick wanted us to regard the first and last of his final 8 films as the sexual growth stories, the next 2 in as the insanity of war stories, the next 2 as the science and evolution stories, and the middle 2 as the society versus the individual stories. And you know, I've come to wonder if this is the real reason that his Holocaust and Napoleon films were never realized. Had they appeared after Full Metal Jacket, their opposite number was doomed to be Lolita. And how would that work? That said, you can probably imagine how aptly Aryan Papers would have sat across from the next film back after the disowned Spartacus, Paths of Glory. Or a final scene in the Napoleon picture mirroring the end of The Killing, with the French Emperor's grand designs all going up in smoke. Now, before we get into the thick of it, I have 2 more points. I've written enough over the past 3 years to make an ice cream length video for each title, but I think that's too much ice creaming. I'm sorry. If these windows into Kubrick's mind don't feel quite as thrown wide as before, my website awaits, where you'll find everything you're about to see here and much, much more. And 2, I think I need to show you his quote about how to ruin the Mona Lisa. Have the artist sign it with an explanation of its mysteries. He especially didn't want this for 2001. This has caused me to wonder if he would want us talking about the wonders of the mirror form at all. But then, why do it on every single picture? Why lay out a trail of breadcrumbs if they're not meant to be followed or understood? Why hold up this mass mirror to the audience if we aren't meant to see the reflection? Are we really not supposed to have an answer to the question? Why?
Now answer my question or you'll be standing tall before the man.
I think I was trying to suggest something about the duality of man, sir.
The what?
The duality of man, the Jungian thing, sir.
Whose side are you on, son?
So for each title, I thought we would look at the large-scale nature of how each story was structured, and then consider one or two of the major code sequences that can be traced. Full Metal Jacket, coming 7 years after the arch complexity of The Shining, features one of the simplest structures, which you can probably visualize without my telling you. There's the boot camp sequence.
Sir, yes, sir! Private Joker, why did you join my beloved corps? Sir, to kill, sir! So you're a killer? Sir, yes, sir! Let me see your war face.
The middle part, where Joker lives the life of a frustrated journalist.
You get wasted your first day in the field and it'd be my fault.
A high school girl could do my job.
And the final part, where Joker reunites with Cowboy and joins his company for their push into the Perfume River area.
I'm not trying to run this squad. I'm just saying we can't leave her like this.
If you want to waste her, go on. Waste her.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts? Didn't Mommy and Daddy show you enough attention when you were a child?
Just as Pyle is blowing away Hartman and his own animalized self, opposite side Joker is meeting Animal Mother for the first time with his I Am Become Death helmet. You may have noticed a similarity in the way these two characters look and speak.
You're a real comedian.
Well, they call me the Joker.
Well, I got a joke for you.
Joker. Everybody hates me now. Even you.
Joker's boss during the middle section is named Lockhart. And it just so happens that Hartman explodes over a loose lock.
Jesus H. Christ. Private Pyle, why is your footlocker unlocked? Sir, I don't know, sir.
At which point in the back half, we're transitioning between Joker and Cowboy just roaming around sort of aimlessly, and their battle with the Lady Sniper. On the front side, Hartman's loose lock explosion marks a transition between the two halves of the boot camp sequence. In the first half, he's been trying to reform Pyle's discipline issues on his own, and in the second half, he punishes everyone else anytime Pyle makes a mistake. Leading to the sequence where they beat Pyle with endless bars of soap, which happens opposite the selling of this sex worker, with who knows how many Johns in her past.
Remember, it's just a bad dream, bad boy.
Oh, Ow! Ow! No! Ow! Ow!
This loose lock transition happens at the same time as the back half makes its transition, expressed through the death of Cowboy's platoon leader, Crazy Earl. We meet Crazy Earl right as Hartman is getting blown away, Hartman's blood seeming to explode out of Earl. So the story basically breaks down into these 5 chunks. And as Pyle is broken down on one side, his mirror self, Animal Mother, is taking greater and greater charge on the other side. There's a similar duality going on between Joker and Cowboy. They also look and talk alike.
Been getting any?
Only your sister.
Well, better my sister than my mom, though my mom's not bad.
But there's also a little Cowboy in Joker from the beginning, when he imitates John Wayne, the epitome of 20th century cowboy icons, usually in moments when he's feeling awkward and threatened.
Well, Pilgrim, only after ya eat the peanuts out of my shit. I am in a world of shit.
And just as Hartman and Pyle murder-suicide in a bathroom they call the Head,
What is this Mickey Mouse shit? What in the name of Jesus H. Christ are you animals doing in my head?
Cowboy is shot to death through a gap in a building featuring Vietnamese words that can be translated as the mind, by a woman who will beg to be shot in the middle of her head, as if saying, "Finish the job. Finish the job." How symbols largely speak to the other side of the film is through the drawings on the helmets of the soldiers, like how, as Cowboy dies from his shot through the mind, Joker's bullseye is floating over Hartman's head. There's a ton of examples like that, really, but the art references that caught my attention the most come from the names on the Marines' jerseys, which speak to Kubrick's other films. Corey was the name of the actor playing the raped Mrs. Alexander in A Clockwork Orange, and Rossini is the composer responsible for a few of that film's soundtrack songs. A John Updike novel appears in Eyes Wide Shut, while Jimmy Carter is pretty openly referenced in The Shining. Not to mention the fact that this is all happening atop an 11-rung ladder, a la Jacob's Ladder, which a recurring song in The Shining is all about.
Tony, do you think that'll get the job?
So if 8-Ball is our connection to Kubrick's various butchered pool images, it's worth noting that the Marine who tries to go save him is named Doc.
We're not leaving Doc J and 8-Ball out there. Doc J and 8-Ball are wasted.
Doc J and 8-Ball get shot finally to death opposite these other Kubrick references climbing by. Kubrick himself is heard and not seen in the film as the mild-mannered and totally ineffectual Commander Murph.
You're senior NCO, Cowboy. You're in charge.
And last appearing as Cowboy gets shot through a hole in the mind that wasn't there a moment earlier.
Donna, give me that radio. Murphy, this is Cowboy, over.
All right, what does it all mean? I think it's this. First, we have the relationship between body and mind, and then the struggle for a master art maker to create art that has a real impact on the subject matter it's grappling with. Great art requires a sensitivity and vulnerability to one's emotional life and the emotional lives of others, but it also requires the discipline to do what needs to be done, to both realize what you want your work to be and to get it past the completion line. If you live only for your head, you'll start to forget what the other is going through when you tie them up and beat them or buy sex from them. But if you live only for your mind, how will you protect yourself when the heads come knocking? The reality of war is that it requires a sort of groupthink and a sort of selflessness. If you cared about what happened to your head or your mind as a result of war, you would be wise to run screaming and never return. But if you're going to be a soldier or a filmmaker, there's a balance to strike between the reality of your individuality, your body and mind, with the need for you to be selflessly part of the group effort. As characters get shot on one side of the film, their blood seems to explode out of the character on the other side, who is usually either Pyle or Joker. These men are dying in ways they can't even detect. Pyle's suicide makes Joker leery of other such haunted men, but his love for Cowboy lures out his feeling side too much in too dangerous a place. Watching Cowboy die is like watching himself die. And when the opportunity comes for him to fulfill his one wish, to kill somebody, he's felt the death of his fellow head and fellow mind too deeply. He felt them as his own. And he fails to realize that this murder will be a suicide.
You, John Wayne? Is this me?
Who said that? Who the fuck said that? Who's the slimy little communist shit twinkle-toed cocksucker down here who just signed his own death warrant?
Skipping over The Shining, the next film back is Barry Lyndon. This one splits almost straight down the middle. The first half is the story of the fatherless Redmond Barry's many adventures fighting against incredible odds to rise above his peasant origins and instincts, with Lady Lyndon appearing a minute and a half past the hinge, at which point it becomes all about his fight to cope with upper-class boredom, his fight against a fatherless stepson who wants him dead, and his fight to overcome his peasant origins and instincts that threaten irreversible financial ruin. And I say fight because that's what the mirror form reveals more than anything. This is a story about dueling. It opens on Barry's father being killed in a duel, and its very center is a more vigorous, less deadly duel. 9 minutes of Barry trading shots with his stepson, Lord Bullingdon, links up with a 5-minute sequence of Barry dueling Captain John Quinn. Then his mother's battle of wits with Reverend Runt takes us to the highwayman standoff with Captain Feeney. Followed by 5 minutes with a soldier named Toole, a little swordplay with his son, Brian, a lengthy skirmish with the French that overlays a brawl with Lord Bullingdon, caused by a whipping, which was caused by a spanking. Then we have this Prussian officer getting whipped, which leads into this superior little Englishman getting whipped, while an opposite figure fires his gun straight at the young lad's heart. If we count card games, this would account for much of the middle of the film, but if not, then this proposal of a duel occurs right across from this verbal duel with Sir Charles Lyndon, becoming one of 2 instances in the story of something Barry does resulting in someone else's death.
I hope you're not thinking of leaving us soon, Sir Charles.
And the other death he causes isn't John Quinn. That duel was a conspiracy designed to get Barry out of Berryville.
He recovered from his wound. The shot you hit him with was not likely to hurt him, for it was only made of tow.
Tow?
No, the one death Barry definitely creates is his own son's. Right across from his having everything in the world taken from him, everything in the world is taken from him. Barry buys Brian a horse that lifts the boy high into the sky before dropping him down to his disabling and death. The last shot in the film shows Wilton House, which has a ceiling painted to show the Daedalus and Icarus myth, the story of a father who designed wings of wax that worked for the father, but fell the son. And Barry kept this horse with a man named Doolin.
I'm sorry to trouble you with this, Mr. Lyndon, but I believe Master Brian may have disobeyed your orders and stolen away to Doolin's farm.
This all playing out right across from his duel against Toole, which ends with Barry being hoisted into the triumphant sky. Doolin worked for the father, but fell the son. Or to put it another way,
Barry was one of those born clever enough at gaining a fortune, but incapable of keeping one. For the qualities and energies which lead a man to achieve the first are often the very cause of his ruin in the latter case.
The frustrating fact is that Charles Lyndon was sort of right to doubt Barry's fiscal sophistication.
He wants to step into my shoes. He wants to step into my shoes.
A concept that Bullingdon is sort of right to later parody, using Brian as his unwitting cat's paw.
Don't you think he fits my shoes very well, your ladyship?
But they are only right in light of the particular societal structure they find themselves in.
Dear child, what a pity it is I am not dead for your sake.
Barry did all this fighting and double-crossing to reach a level where he wouldn't have to fight for everything.
When I take up a person, Mr. Lyndon, he or she is safe. There is no question about them anymore. My friends are the best people. Oh, I don't mean that they're the most virtuous, or indeed the least virtuous, or the cleverest, or the stupidest, or the richest, or the best born, but the best. In a word, people about whom there is no question.
And where his son would never have to be denied anything.
Will you both promise me something?
Yes.
Promise me never to quarrel so, but to love each other, so that we may meet again in heaven, where Bullingdon said quarrelsome people would never go.
We promise.
But you can't sword fight the numbers in your ladyship's bank account. And if you think you can duel with death itself, you will lose. And where will your sense of fight be then? Even when your opponent is as hateful and devoid of honor as can be imagined.
I have not received satisfaction.
Perhaps this is why the cousin who propelled him onto this quest for honorable good standing was named Nora.
Yes, if Mr. Barry will apologize and go to Dublin, I will consider the whole affair honorably settled.
While the woman he marries for convenience is named Honoria.
Mr. Redmond Barry, the last occasion on which we met, you wantonly caused me injury and dishonor, in such a manner and to such an extent as to which no gentleman can willingly suffer without demanding satisfaction, however much time intervenes.
Honor, in both these cases, means only, I want the woman, Nora, Honoria, who's been throwing herself at you, because...
I'm an Englishman, I am, and a man of property.
Or to put it more poetically,
I have borne as long as mortal could endure the ill treatment of the insolent Irish upstart whom you have taken into your bed.
in fact, the open feud between Barry and Bullingdon begins with a painting by Jean-Henri Fragonard hanging behind Barry's head. Fun fact, this happens to be the other of the two, maybe three, paintings that appear in multiple Kubrick films, this one appearing behind Hubbard Hubbard as he comes to demand satisfaction from Claire Quilty.
Hey, you're a sort of bad loser, Captain. Didn't anyone ever tell you? It's not really who wins, it's how you play, like the champs.
But yes, Barry Lyndon is the tale of a quest, first in Ireland, then much of the rest of Europe, for honor. Like the honor it takes to control your rage when the men in your life seem determined to tear everything down. And since we're talking paintings, if you've seen Barry Lyndon, you know this is one Rococo-riddled affair. But what's unique here is how the artworks are the artworks that really hang in these real buildings. So I began to wonder if there was really a point in identifying them, since they might very well be incidental. And from what I've ID'd so far, I would say, yes, that Kubrick's cleverness here wasn't making these real places seem incidental to bury what he's using their paintings to say. Like this piece, Tobias and the Angel, appears opposite Barry stealing the identity of a gay soldier. In the story, Tobias meets an angel, but he's unaware the man's an angel, and this angel tells Tobias what to do with a giant fish he's caught. In Barry's story, he's taken the garb from the angelic John Fakenham, and uses this disguise to fall into the care of the woman Leischen, a German name meaning fish. His cover story during this passage is that he's on his way to see one
General Williamson. Yes. General Percival Williamson,
who shares a name with a knight of King Arthur's who was seeking the Holy Grail, and instead found the Fisher King.
Sergeant!
Perhaps this is why the film's final duel takes place in a building that sits at the foot of Glastonbury Tor, which legend has it was the original Avalon. And it's since been theorized that the hill's terraces used to function as a giant labyrinth. That brings us back to Daedalus, whose escape from the labyrinth is what he's best known for, and, as a snapshot of a man's life, inspires our sympathy completely. Less sympathetic is his origin story, where he murders his nephew for showing signs of brilliance that may one day outshine his own. The gods transform the nephew into a partridge, however, and it's this very bird that appears to gloat over Daedalus after exiting the labyrinth as he buries his fallen son. Knowing this, we can almost appreciate why the maze-making mastermind should have been imprisoned, and in a cage of his own designing, which he'll need to be even cleverer now to escape. The center of Barry's story has him courting Honoria at the Blenheim Water Gardens, a short walk from their famous hedge maze. Note the Greek key design around the base of the Borghese gladiator statue, itself symbolic of labyrinths. The final phase of Daedalus's life has him pursued by the king who imprisoned him in the labyrinth, now tempting Daedalus out of hiding with the allure of solving a riddle involving a spirally seashell. Thanks to the mirror form, the final phase of Barry's life now reflects over Shell Cottage, a building famously covered head to toe in little shells from the sea, moments after the end of his final duel amidst the partridges and doves. Daedalus solved his shell riddle. But did Barry? One answer is to go back to the fishy Leischen, who appears opposite Barry being entranced by
Ludovico Cordi, a disciple of Alessandro Allori. It's dated 1605 and shows the adoration of the Magi.
If Barry had only realized that glory lies not in weaving grand designs, but in a simple life with a good-hearted partner who loves him and whom he loves, he might not have overlooked this boon as severely as he does. But perhaps this is because there's one more labyrinth Kubrick designed for Barry that is almost impossible to detect. A labyrinth of history. Lady Lyndon signs 3 checks throughout the film. Absurd because they tell us the story ends in 1789, when Brian was to turn 9, despite Barry marrying Lady Lyndon.
A year later, on the 15th of June, in the year 1773,
and how,
at the end of a year, her ladyship presented Barry with a son.
These dates just don't make sense. But by setting Barry's first experience in warfare during the 7 Years' War, as does the source novel, Kubrick establishes a timeline that's a little harder to wriggle out of. The narrator tells us,
though this encounter is not recorded in any history books, it was memorable enough for those who took part.
But then, when Barry is fleeing the service, he encounters Leischen, who tells him,
there is nothing to eat something since Springbok.
This would most likely make Barry's skirmish something very much from any history book, the Battle of Grunberg, which took place in 1761. For the part of the adult Lord Bullingdon, Kubrick cast the late great Leon Vitali, who was 28 when the film debuted. So if the story really ends in 1789, this would be 28 years from Barry encountering Lycian, and maybe, just maybe, 27 years from the birth of a child they might have created together. It's as if Barry passed up a Christ baby for some kind of shadow Christ? You know, maybe Barry and Lycian got it on the very same night that... well, never mind that mental image. So if this is the labyrinth, how does one escape such a confusion of history? This brings me to super condense one of my favorite concepts, being a lover of history.